The weight you carry when you don't complain. They always said I was strong. Not in a loud way. Not in a way that fills a room or lifts heavy things. Just in the way that never needed help. The kind of strength that shows up every day, answers emails, pays bills, and doesn't talk about what's burning inside. And for a long time, I wore that like a badge. I was the man who handled things. The reliable one. The steady one. The quiet one who nodded through stress and pushed through tired days. Even here, in Germany, new country, new job, new language, I stayed silent. I learned the systems. Showed up early. Did what was asked. Never said what I felt. But something in me started to go quiet. And not in a peaceful way. In a, I don't recognize myself anymore way. I didn't see it at first. Because burnout doesn't arrive as fire. It arrives as disappearance. You stop calling friends back. You stop cooking real meals. You stop looking at your own face in the mirror. And one day you realize you haven't felt anything real in months. I remember sitting in a meeting, nodding while my manager spoke in perfect, emotionless German, and thinking, none of this matters. And I don't even have the energy to pretend it does. But I kept going, because that's what men do, right? We keep going, even when our minds are heavy, even when we feel like ghosts in button-up shirts, even when all we want is someone to ask, "Are you okay?" Really, but no one asks, because we've trained them not to. We say we're fine. We joke. We say can't complain, even when we haven't slept properly in weeks. And it eats away at us, slowly, efficiently. That's what happened to me. I became a version of myself I didn't recognize. Efficient, pleasant, quiet, but hollow. And the scariest part? No one noticed. Not even me. Until I couldn't feel joy anymore. Not in the things I used to love. Not in food. Not in music. Not even in the Friday afternoons when the work week ended and everyone around me felt relief. I didn't feel anything. Just a kind of tired that sleep couldn't fix. And that's when I knew something had to change. But I didn't know how. Because we don't talk about this. Not really. Not the men I know. Not the men I grew up around. We talk about politics. Football. Stocks. Cars. Never about loneliness. Never about the fear of not being enough. Never about what it feels like to be praised for strength while drowning in silence. So I started writing. Not for anyone else. Just for me. One page at a time. One thought at a time. And for the first time in years, I heard my own voice again. Tired. Soft. But honest. I didn't know what healing looked like. I still don't. But I know it begins like this. By telling the truth. Even if no one's listening yet. Especially then. The first time I learned to hold it in. The first time I didn't cry when I wanted to. I was 9. My bike had slipped out from under me on the pavement, and I scraped my knee deep. It stung. A sharp, hot pain. Blood running down my shin. I remember the gravel, the dirt, the shame. My uncle saw it happen. He didn't run over. He just looked at me and said, "You're a tough guy. Walk it off." And I did, even though my throat was tight, and I wanted nothing more than to let the tears fall. That was the moment, not the fall, but the silence that came after. It was the first time I swallowed pain like it was a duty. And from that day on, I became very good at it. We don't talk about how masculinity isn't taught with words. It's passed down through gestures, through what gets praised and what doesn't, through what's ignored. Pain is private. Fear is weakness. Softness is dangerous. So I learned how to carry everything quietly, to not interrupt, to not explain, to be good, to be capable. And in the silence, I mistook disappearance for maturity. Even now, as a grown man, I hear those voices in my head. Don't be dramatic. You're fine. Nobody wants to hear about your problems. Just keep moving. Fix it. And I did for years. I fixed everything for everyone else. I paid the bills, sent the birthday texts, stayed late at work, said yes even when I meant no. But I never fixed the thing inside me, the thing that said, you can't stop. You're not allowed to fall apart. No one will catch you. I carried that belief all the way to Germany, through customs, into job interviews, into rooms where I smiled politely while shrinking inside. Here, everything looked perfect. The job, the apartment, the career path. But I was unraveling in places no one could see. And I didn't say anything, because I didn't know how. Because I didn't want to be the foreign guy with feelings. Because I thought vulnerability would make people uncomfortable. Because silence felt safer. Until it didn't. Until the silence turned into numbness. Until I stopped recognizing my own reflection. Until I realized the strongest thing I could do was not to keep holding it in, but to finally let it out, bit by bit, word by word, page by page. Not to anyone else, at first, just to myself. Because there's a version of me in here, one that's still soft, still scared, still human, and he deserves to breathe again. The highway never asks how you're really doing. I drive more than I need to, not because I'm going anywhere, but because the highway doesn't expect anything from me. You can be anything out here. You can be nobody. You can be broken and quiet and half alive, and still, the road will open for you. There's something about the white lines flying by that makes me feel like I'm in motion, even when I feel stuck inside. And maybe that's why I drive. To remind myself I'm not completely frozen. In this car, in this moment, I don't have to smile. I don't have to explain. I don't have to translate my feelings into something professional, something palatable. I just have to keep the wheel straight. And there's a comfort in that. Sometimes, when the sun's low and the world turns that soft gray blue just before dusk, I imagine pulling off the road and never going back. Not in a dramatic way. Just quietly, turning off my phone, letting the job fade behind me like exhaust, driving until the thoughts settle, until I remember what peace feels like. The highway has become my confessional. This is where I cry. Not loudly, not with sobs, but with that silent kind of grief that lives in the corners of your eyes. No one sees me here. Not really. Not in the way I want to be seen. Back in the city, I'm the man who's always composed. I hold doors. I take notes. I say, no worries, I've got it. Even when my chest feels like a locked room filling slowly with water. But on the highway, I am just breath and motion. I remember one particular night, a Thursday, late autumn, too dark to see clearly, too tired to care. I was driving home after another long day, another round of being reliable, another performance of being okay. And then a song came on the radio, one I hadn't heard in years. It was stupid, really, nothing profound, but something cracked open in me. I pulled over, just off the road, into a patch of shoulder between exits, and I sat there with the engine running, and my hands shaking on the wheel. And for the first time in a long time, I whispered out loud, I can't keep living like this. It didn't feel like a breakdown. It felt like honesty, the kind that only comes when you're alone in a place that doesn't ask you to be strong. Since then, I've started seeing the road differently, not just as escape, but as space. A place between what I was told to be and who I'm trying to become. A place where I can sit in the middle lane and admit I'm tired and still keep going. Not fast, not toward success, but towards something that feels like truth. I don't know exactly where I'm heading, but I know I'm no longer driving just to survive. I'm driving to feel, to breathe, to remember, and that, for now, is enough. Softness is a form of strength. I've spent most of my life being afraid of softness, not in other people, in myself. Softness made me nervous, because it felt like an invitation for someone to hurt you, to misread you, to mistake your silence for emptiness, to take advantage of your quiet. So I built a version of myself that didn't need softness, just function, structure, control. The man who always says, "No problem." The man who never panics. The man who doesn't cry when he's overwhelmed. He goes for a run, or does the dishes, or fixes something that doesn't need fixing. But lately, I've started to notice the cost of that performance. Because inside, under all that composure, is a man who's been holding his breath for years. And the truth is, I don't want to hold it anymore. I want to be able to say, "This hurts. I'm confused. I feel alone in this room full of people." Not because I want pity, not because I want saving, but because I want to feel like I still exist. Like I'm not just a collection of deliverables and duties and perfectly written emails. The other night, I left work a little earlier than usual. No one noticed. Or maybe they did and didn't say anything. I walk home slowly. No headphones. Just the sound of my own footsteps and the city softening around me. It had rained earlier, and the pavement still held that scent. Wet stone, cold air, something tender. I saw a couple holding hands. And for a moment, I envied them. Not for the romance, but for the permission. The permission to be warm, to be open, to be held. Men like me are not often held. Not emotionally, not spiritually, not even in conversation. We're expected to carry others, to carry ourselves. And we do, silently, efficiently, until the weight becomes our identity. But I don't want that identity anymore. I don't want to be the man who only exists through his usefulness. I want to be human again. Messy, in progress, alive. I want to be able to tell someone that I'm scared and not feel shame for it. I want to feel something and not apologize afterward. That's what I'm trying to learn now. Not how to fix, not how to endure, but how to stay with my own softness long enough to remember that it's never been the problem. It's always been the way through. So I write, I walk, I drive, I sit in silence and let the discomfort rise. And when it comes, that tightness in the chest, the tears I still struggle to let fall, the ache in my stomach that says you've been holding too much for too long. I don't run anymore. I listen, because maybe the softest thing a man can do is finally listen to himself, wanting something more than survival. I used to think all I wanted was peace, but now I realize I want more. I want mornings that don't begin with dread, afternoons that don't blur into survival, evenings that don't feel like recovery from being everything for everyone else. I want stillness, not the numb kind that comes from burnout, but the kind that breathes, the kind where time stretches gently, where you can sit by a window and not feel like you're wasting something. But wanting feels dangerous when you've spent your life managing expectation. So I tucked it away. My wants, my hopes, my what-ifs, especially as a man, especially in Germany, especially in a work culture where ambition is measured in titles, not tenderness. I became good at needing nothing. Was brought to nothing, I'm good. Always, even when I wasn't, because to want felt like weakness. To want rest, beauty, softness, space. It felt selfish. But lately, something's been shifting. The more honest I become with myself, in silence, in writing, in those long drives in the Autobahn, the more I realize how much I've given up just to appear fine. I've said yes to things I hated, smiled through things that hurt, been praised for my reliability while my soul sat quietly, shrinking in the corner of every meeting. And now I want something else. I don't want to live in a world where my value is tied to how much I can absorb without breaking. I don't want to be the rock, if it means I'm never allowed to crumble. I don't want to keep editing myself for the comfort of others. I want to feel proud of the life I'm building, not just because it's stable, but because it's mine. Even if that means fewer promotions. Even if that means leaving a job I once begged to have. Even if that means choosing softness in a world that still thinks men shouldn't cry. Because this isn't about rebelling. It's about returning. To the version of me who once laughed without checking who was watching. To the man who loved the smell of books and the sound of wind in trees. To the boy who used to feel everything and didn't think that made him less. I want to be him again. Or at least meet him where he is now. Older, maybe wiser, definitely tired, but still capable of choosing a different kind of life. One that doesn't require my disappearance to function. One where I can exist fully, even when I'm quiet. Even when I'm not fixing anything. Even when I'm just here, breathing, living, wanting, and knowing, finally, that that's allowed. The days I began saying not today changed and arrived with fanfare. There was no dramatic resignation, no epiphany on a mountain, no sudden burst of clarity under fluorescent office lights. It arrived in the smallest of ways, by saying not today to the 7 a.m. meeting that didn't need to exist, not today to the Slack message marked urgent that wasn't, not today to the impulse to say yes just to avoid being misunderstood. The first time I turned something down, my hands were shaking. It was a project I'd normally jump on, because I'm dependable, right? Because I handle things. But that day I just didn't. I said, I'm at capacity. And then I hit send, and I waited for the sky to fall. It didn't. No one screamed. No one punished me. No one pulled my name off the door. And that silence, the one I feared, became my teacher. I realized I had built an entire identity around being the man who never drew a line, and all it did was make people think I didn't have any. So now I'm drawing them, not to push people away, but to finally come home to myself. It started small. I stopped checking emails after 7 p.m. I started taking real lunch breaks, not scrolling, not half working, just eating, breathing, looking out a window. I played the same jazz album 3 times in one weekend just because it felt good in my chest. I called my mother and didn't rush the call. I let a friend talk for 20 minutes without feeling like I had to solve anything. And slowly, my nervous system began to unclench. Like a fist I didn't know I'd been making. It felt foreign at first, like I was betraying some unspoken rule that men must always be useful. But then something shifted. I stopped feeling guilty for resting. And that was the moment I knew I was healing. Not healed, not yet, but healing. Because I no longer needed to justify the softness. I no longer needed to explain the boundaries. I no longer needed the world to approve of my stillness. I just needed to feel it. And I did. Driving home one evening. No music. Just the sound of the tires. I looked out across the fields on the side of the Autobahn. The light was golden. The kind that doesn't last long. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I thought, this is enough. This moment. This breath. This quiet refusal to keep rushing toward a version of myself I never even chose. I was still driving, still moving, still unsure what comes next. But I was no longer lost. I was just finally going my own way, the man I can live with. I used to think strength meant becoming someone other people could depend on. And maybe it does, but only if you don't disappear in the process. I spent years building a version of myself that made sense on paper. Stable, responsible, steady, and I was all of those things. But I was also tired, lonely, quiet in a way that didn't feel peaceful, just hidden. I wore my resilience like armor, and beneath it, my tenderness forgot how to breathe. But now I'm learning that there's another kind of strength. The kind that stays soft. The kind that can say, I don't have the answer, and still be enough. The kind that doesn't perform healing, but lives honestly, even when it's messy. I'm not trying to impress anyone anymore. Not my bosses. Not the version of myself I thought I had to be by 30. Not the people who misunderstood my silence as indifference. I'm just trying to become a man I can live with. One who tells the truth. One who rests. One who doesn't flinch at his own reflection. The highway metaphor never really left me. It's still where I think best. Still where the world feels big enough to hold the weight I carry. But these days, I don't drive to escape. I drive to listen. To let the road teach me what the boardroom never could. That motion without meaning is just exhaustion in disguise. That pace doesn't equal purpose. That silence isn't failure. And that softness was never the enemy. The other day, I passed the same exit I used to take home from work. I didn't take it. I just kept driving. Not because I was running, but because I'm finally okay with not arriving right away. This life isn't a checklist. It's a conversation. And for the first time in years, I'm actually speaking. Still becoming. Sometimes I wonder who I would have become if I hadn't kept it all in. If I had said no sooner. If I had cried in front of someone instead of holding it behind closed doors. If I had said, I'm scared, if I had believed that softness was survival, not a liability. But then again, maybe this was the only road that could bring me here. Not the fastest one, not the easiest, but mine. And I've stopped apologizing for how long it took. Some things can't be rushed, especially becoming. I'm not trying to reinvent myself anymore. I'm not seeking reinvention, just recognition. To look at the man I am and say, I know you, I remember you, I see you now. He's not always brave, not always steady, but he is honest. He pauses when he needs to. He lets himself feel. He says, I don't know without shame. And most of all, he stays. He doesn't leave himself when it gets hard. He doesn't numb everything out just to be palatable. He stays. That's the biggest change. I no longer leave myself to be accepted by others. Now I take myself with me. Into rooms. Into emails. Into relationships. Into days that used to ask for more than I could give. And sometimes I still forget. Sometimes I slip. I overextend. I silence. I revert. But then I remember. This is the work. Not being perfect. Not being fixed. But being present. So if you're reading this, and you've been carrying more than anyone knows, if you've smiled through the weight, if you've worn silence like a second skin, if you've been strong so long you forgot what softness feels like, come sit here. You don't have to prove anything. You made it this far. That's more than enough. And even now, you're still becoming. When okay is everything. The first time someone asked me how I was doing, and I said, I'm okay, and actually meant it, I almost cried. Not because I was sad, but because that word had never held so much weight before. Okay, not thriving, not crushing it, not living the dream. Just, okay, it was soft, it was honest, it was real, and for someone who had spent years translating pain into productivity, being okay felt like a miracle. Because I've known days when getting out of bed was a victory. Days when I'd stare at my reflection and wonder if anyone would notice if I faded just a little more. I've known what it's like to keep showing up when everything inside wants to stop. To laugh because silence would expose the fracture in your chest. To make coffee like a ritual of pretending you still know how to taste. So when okay came, not as performance, but as peace, it felt like something sacred. I think we underestimate the quiet middle ground. We chase happiness. We glorify hustle. But we never stop to honor okay. The kind of okay that says, I'm breathing. I made it through the day. I don't hate myself right now. I can sit with my own thoughts and not feel like I'm drowning. That's the kind of okay I fought for. And now I protect it. With boundaries. With rest. With people who don't flinch when I speak honestly. There's this cafe I go to now. Small. Quiet. Tucked into a side street in a city that once felt too big to hold me. I sit by the window with my tea. I watch people pass. I write sometimes. Not for anyone else. Just to hear my voice again. And I think, this is enough. This moment. This breath. This stillness. I'm not rushing anymore. Not proving. Not overperforming. Not afraid of the silence. Because inside that silence, there's a man I've been waiting to meet for a long time. He's not extraordinary. He's not broken. He's not behind. He's just okay. And for the first time in years, that's everything. Thank you for staying. There's a version of this story I used to imagine, the one where everything makes sense in the end, where I find balance, where work finally sees me, where love arrives on cue, where healing is linear and rewarding. But that's not the story I lived. And that's okay. This story, my story, is quieter, messier, more true. It's about not giving up when no one was watching. It's about showing up for a job you no longer recognize yourself in, and still leaving with your dignity intact. It's about sitting in a parking lot, crying behind the wheel, and still going home to feed yourself. It's about the man who stayed, not because he wasn't tired, but because something inside him whispered, "Don't disappear." And he listened. This man, me, I've spent years becoming someone I can finally come home to, someone I can sit with in silence without shame, someone I trust to tell the truth, even when it trembles. There's still noise, still pressure, still emails I ignore longer than I should, still moments when I'm tempted to go back to the man who smiled too much and rested too little. But I don't go back, because the man I used to be, he did what he had to do to survive. And the man I am now, he's learning how to live. There's gratitude in that. Not the loud, motivational kind, but the kind that sits in your chest like a soft anchor and says, you didn't abandon yourself. And that matters. So this is for him, for every version of me that kept showing up, the one who held it all together, the one who cracked, the one who confessed, the one who finally started asking for more. And this is for you, if you've been carrying more than your share in silence, if you confuse being needed with being seen, if you built strength out of suppression, you're not alone. You never were. And you don't have to disappear to be worthy of love, peace, or rest. You're allowed to be soft. You're allowed to want something gentler. You're allowed to be a man and feel everything. And if all you did today was keep going, then thank you. Thank you for staying. That's enough. That's everything.